This podcast is brought to you by India Water Portal, a globally visited website dedicated exclusively to stories, knowledge, information, and news on rural and urban water in India.
Welcome to Voices for Water, Sundar. How are you doing and where are you talking to us from?
I'm doing good, Karthik, and nice to be part of this show. So I'm right now in Anand in Gujarat. Yeah,
In Gujarat.
yeah, in Gujarat. Anand, the
Oh,
place called Anand in Gujarat.
yes. Okay. Wonderful. I'm hearing about the weather being extraordinarily cold and foggy over there. I wouldn't know because I'm recording this from Bombay. Hope all well at your end.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, it is,
Sundar,
it is, it is. Yeah, it is one of the colder seasons that we have had, colder winters that we have had last few years.
yeah, I would think so. I didn't, people are telling me that flights have been delayed to Ahmedabad for a couple of days now, which I've
Yeah.
not
It
heard.
is. Yeah,
So anyway, we live in a world where climate is constantly changing, which actually is a good segue to my first question to you, which is I spend a lot of my time in the national capital region, which is Delhi, Gurgaon, etc. Right? And when people say the air quality is not great, which is something people say a lot, especially in the last 4 5 years, I know exactly
yeah.
what they mean, right? I know that they're looking at an AQI index. I know there's a parts per million sort of a thing. So there is a currency to that measurement. Right? When we say water quality, what do we actually mean? What constitutes water quality? What is the currency there?
Yes, Karthik, you're right about air quality becoming more commonly known about last few years, and especially because of the Delhi fog and the air quality, especially in winter, getting so bad. Um, but even I mean, like when we talk about water, I mean, we all have a sense of water purity, right? I mean, we look at water and say, I mean, it's dirty, or if you can smell it or taste it, so we all have a sense of how clean or dirty water is. So that's basically water quality to begin with. But then yes, if you go into the science of what quality of water is, um, so there's I mean, it all depends on how good is it for what you need water for, right? So if you're talking about water as in drinking water, so what's very important is how good is drinking water for our health, right? I mean, so water can have impurities that can really cause diseases right away. So if you have bacteria or viruses in water, I mean, we can get sick right now. But then
Hmm.
you can also have chemicals like carcinogens, or all kind of things in water which can make us sick in the long run, right? So water quality is about the quality of water for how good is it for our health when we look at drinking water quality. But then when you look at water quality in a very broad way, it's not just about our health, but it's also about if you look at river water quality, right?
Hmm.
So then it's about how good is water for let us say the aquatic life, or the fish, and other things that move on the river. But then you can also talk about water quality for industries, specific industries. Let us say semiconductor industries require water quality to be a certain kind, and so on.
Hmm.
But if you ask me, what's and the area of water quality that someone like me works on, so what I am concerned a lot about is drinking water quality. That is, how good is water for human health?
Right, right. And I could see how very quickly I assumed that we are the only species in this planet, which
Oh
is a
yeah,
common
yeah,
mistake, I guess, that all of
yeah.
us make. Which also, uh, leads me to my next question, which is also, I think, an area where a lot of your work has gone into, which is the water quality index. Right? Can you throw some light on what it is and what are the different variables that constitute this index?
Yes, Karthik, that's a good question, because often, when you get into water science and, the chemistry of water, then it becomes too inaccessible to people. I mean, at the
Hmm.
end of the day, we all relate to water in a very, very natural manner, right? I mean, if you go to a mountain, if you look at a spring and you see natural water coming out, or rainwater, then we know that it's good, right? We don't need anybody to really tell us, but and when you see water which is dirty flowing down in the drain, then we sense that it is bad, in any way, right? There's something wrong with it. But most of the time, most of the impurities are such that we don't see it, we cannot smell it, and we definitely cannot taste it.
Hmm.
So I mean, most kind of bacteria or viruses, obviously we cannot see it, but then even most of the chemicals that are harmful to us, we don't we can't really even taste those. But if you look at if you ask, and if you just walk around the road, and if you ask people, how good is water, we've gotten used to the taste of water. So people look at the salts in water, and if water has very less salts, then people have started to feel that it's very the taste is good, right? So these are ways in which we smell water or we sense water, or look at the purity of water. But if you look at how science looks at water, it looks at water in three ways. One is the physical properties, the chemical properties, and the bacteriological properties. So physical properties in the sense turbidity, or which is more visual, but also other aspects about smell and various other things that we can actually visually kind of make out. But there are so many chemicals in water, which can cause us harm beyond a certain level. So I mean, we all have heard about iron, which is very important as a nutrient, but iron in water beyond a certain level is really bad for human health. The same holds true for a lot of other things which are actually part of the natural system, such as nitrogen, nitrates, or fluorides, arsenic. So there are a lot of them, and if you look at standards, for water quality in India, we have something called the Bureau of Indian Standards, BIS. So there are around 35 to 40 chemicals listed out there. But when you look at very practical purposes, when we actually test for water, then mainly we look for 14 of those parameters. So mostly when you go to a lab, the lab checks for around 14 of them, and that constitutes the primary water quality index. That is, how many of them really come out positive. Let us say a fluoride, an arsenic, or nitrate really are above safety levels. Then one needs to really pay attention to and see how you can purify water, or go to a better source of water.
Hmm. Hmm. I can totally relate to it because the other day, someone in my locality just messaged me saying, the TDS in your water is very high. I thought he was talking about water tax or something like that. Then I realized he's talking about a component in water, and they had a meter for it, right? And I did not even
Yeah.
realize. That's when I realized we are so uneducated on how to measure quality of water, which is extraordinarily ironic, given how important it is to life and health. Um,
Yeah.
you know one question I had before we go into the measurement of it is, what are some of the key causes of water quality problems? Because some of the things you're talking about, right, like very high on arsenic, very high on iron, etc., it's not necessarily pollution. I'm assuming it could do with many different things around water supply of pipes and everything else as well, isn't it? So what are the common causes, or the things that lead to water quality problems in our country?
So, very common sense way, Karthik, when we actually go out and if you ask anybody, what causes water pollution, we just say it's all the drains and, the waste getting out of our houses, and the industries, right? I mean, all this untreated waste, getting out. And that definitely is big cause of water pollution. Like all this plastic which gets out, it's not just the big plastic bags which go out, but also microplastics, which go out.
Hmm.
And definitely, that's a huge cause of water pollution. But um, having said that, what is not very intuitive, and what is in fact causes a huge amount of water contamination, for water quality to go bad, are also other invisible facts. So one big reason why water contamination or pollution has become a big issue in India is because for the last let's say 20, 30 years, because of huge uh, water needs, we have huge population but the same amount of water. So where do we go for water?
Hmm.
So the only way people we go for water is we keep you know puncturing holes into the ground, right? Bore wells, which go deeper and deeper. So what has happened is that our dependence on water for drinking or any needs is all on the groundwater which is below us. The water which is inside rocks. So when we go, let us say 20 feet into the ground, 30 feet into the ground, most of the places it's mainly rainwater which has come last year or year back, and it's all flushing out, and you use it. I mean, relatively, that doesn't carry too much of the minerals, which are there in rocks and the soil. But then, I mean, we have places in Western India. I mean, I'm sure about Karnataka and many places where we are going even 1,000 feet below, 1,500 feet below. I mean, that's quite deep into the earth, right? So when you go deeper and deeper, it's one. I mean, you're going to like rocks which are from old times. We are also going into water which is from old times. I mean,
Hmm.
people have done studies and seen that the water we are actually getting out in some places is almost 1,500 years old rainwater.
Wow.
Such old water. It's not rainwater of this year or last year or 10 years back. It's old water that we are taking out. So what happens to a lot of water that we are pumping out is that it's been with rocks for a long time. It's been with soil for a long time. So a lot of minerals from rocks and soils also get into water. So coming back to your question, so one of the causes of water pollution is also the fact that we are taking out water from quite deep below the earth. We are exploiting our water resources, our groundwater. We are not conserving it. So as a consequence of that, a lot of minerals which are maybe harmful for us, also get into water. Fluoride, arsenic, and of late things like uranium are just examples of this. So that's a big cause, of concern of water pollution. But as
Hmm.
you're right that broader reasons when you actually look at rivers and water bodies are things like unrestricted mining, industries, household waste, going out. So these are also big reasons why our water bodies also are getting polluted.
This is fascinating, right? Like the term mineral water is so abused
I know
in this part of the world, at least, that one doesn't realize that a lot of mineral can actually be extraordinarily unhealthy for you, isn't it?
it does. It
But I
does.
want to pick on something you said, which I've not heard before. You said something about microplastics. Can you double click on that? What are they, and why should we be worried about it?
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Karthik, and we are very less aware about microplastics. And to be very honest, I'm trying to learn more and more about it, to be more conscious and aware about what is microplastics, and are they, how big a problem are they? Because very less is known about microplastics and also nanoplastics. So microplastics and nanoplastics are basically plastic particles which are a micrometer or nanometer in dimension. So these are very small plastics particles. So what really happens is that when our plastic bag or any of our regular plastic material gets in contact with water, so it releases a lot of tiny plastic particles over
Hmm.
time. And then that gets into the waterways, it gets into the rivers, and finally it gets into the oceans in large amounts, and gets accumulated there. So now, one of the fascinating things about it is that when you look at what are the sources of these microplastics, some again something which is coming out from research and lesser known is that the dress that we wear, the dress materials that we wear, a
Hmm.
lot of synthetic material that we wear have roots in polyethylene or microplastic or plastic based material. So when we actually
Right.
wash clothes, each time we wash our clothes, it releases millions of microplastic particles into the water. It's
Okay.
not just about the plastic bags and this, and almost it is being estimated that around 25 to 40% of microplastics in the ocean is actually from cloth materials. So we can make a big difference by looking at more natural material within our clothes. Now there's a lot that we can do, but then these microplastics not just getting into the oceans, but obviously they are consumed by fish, they're consumed by aquatic life, it's coming into drinking water. So what it shows is that it's getting into our blood, it's also getting into newborns, into placenta. So it appears to be that it is all pervasive and all across. So something that we should be really concerned about and acting on.
Wow, this is, the more I listen to you, the more the gravity of the situation sort of, reveals itself to us. Um, you know, Talking about that, right, and talking about how we can control it, I'm a huge believer that what gets measured gets managed. And preparing for this episode, I was just going through your profile. You spent a lifetime on on data around water and water quality. So I want to ask you, um, how much access does government have on water data? I'm assuming the answer to that is a lot. But how does the government curate and utilize this data? And more importantly, how does it share this data with communities for remedial action?
Yes, Karthik. I think this is something which is really very important in terms of information, right? If
Hmm.
you don't know about it, I mean, what does anybody do about it? So when we actually look at data on quality of water, um, um, and one needs to also go back how it's tested. So if you look at it broadly, if you step back and see how do you really test for quality of water, it is done in two different ways. The way it's tested. One is that go to a lab. I mean, there are specific instruments for testing for each of the parameters in water. They give a more precise value and concentrations for each of the aspects of contaminants that we're looking for, and that's one way of looking at water testing. The other way to look at water testing, and that's happened in India especially since the last 15 to 20 years, are what are known as field testing kits, FTKs. So
Hmm.
basically, field testing kits are nothing but simple testing kits for water for certain aspects of water quality that are more widely prevalent across our country, and also for which testing is easier. So there are testing kits. So the meter that you saw for TDS, right, total dissolved solids,
Yeah.
that's one example. But apart from that, you also have testing kits for nitrate, for iron, for fluoride, for arsenic, and so on. I mean, the level of difficulty of using each of these is different, but then potentially one can test for around 10 to 14 such parameters. Um, uh, I mean, it depends, the amount of skill required for each of these, but it's possible, the FTK based testing. So data gets collected in both these ways, from the lab-based testing and the FTK-based testing. And widely, if you see, there is a lot of promotion of both of these ways of testing. That is from laboratories which are within the government. They are called district and block level laboratories. Around 60 to 70% of them are certified by something called NABL. The accreditation of laboratories is done by institution called NABL, and the laboratories are increasingly getting certified by the NABL authority. Whereas the FTKs, that is the field testing kits, are done mainly in villages. So the initiative is to supply gram panchayats, at least in the rural areas,
Hmm.
and much lesser in urban areas, that I've heard of. But in the rural areas, the focus is to supply gram panchayats with FTKs, field testing kits, get people trained on the use of FTKs, and then get it on digital platforms. Get this data on digital platforms.
Right.
Now, while there is a larger vision on testing and data getting collected and putting it on digital platforms, the accessibility of this data is still very poor.
Hmm.
So if you want to go to, if you type on Google, where is water quality data in India, and all that, the Ministry of Jal Shakti, that is the Water Ministry of India, has a platform where you can access, data. So by and large, very broadly, one can actually access this data, across any part of the country. But if you once you try to get into the details, it is within a district, within a block, I mean, within a village, your GPS, your particular location, then
Yeah.
the granularity or access gets poorer and poorer. Compared to the volume of data generation, the
Yeah.
accessibility is still quite poor.
And that's the thing, right? Like, for example, it is one thing for the government to know. I'm assuming, there'll be heat maps on good quality, bad quality of water in different pin codes and villages. But the other thing is, do people living in those, red zone, do they actually know? And
Yeah,
are they
yeah.
sort of understanding this? And is what action is being taken? How much of that do you think is the reality today? How much of people living in those critical areas where water quality is really low do actually know about it?
So yes and no, Karthik. I mean, like what happens. What I generally observe is that there is both paranoia on the quality of water, purity of water,
Hmm.
and there is a whole side which is like totally no information, and you just go about it on both sides, right? So on
Hmm.
the paranoia side, I mean, like have people going for very expensive water treatment, purification, and everything where you don't need it at all, because you get some information on some newspaper and then you react to it, and then you go and get some kind of a purifier and all that. But then the other whole side, even when you actually go and talk to people about a certain problem, the ability to, I mean, as I shared with you, you take this groundwater from long back and you have arsenic in it. It is in ppbs, that is parts per billion. I mean, even
Hmm.
instruments find it difficult to, detect it. And there is a chance that you will get affected with a disease after some time. I mean, all these are chances. I mean, it's not that you drink this water, something is going to happen to you tomorrow. There is a chance, but then the chances of getting affected with diseases are quite severe. I mean, the
Hmm.
kind of diseases which happen are quite severe. So, we just give you an example. Fluoride and arsenic are two important chemical contaminants, in India. So
Hmm.
fluoride, in the long run, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, it gets into like bone deformities. So that's what it kind of results into. And arsenic can get you into. I mean, one thing is a disease called skin lesions in the body called arsenicosis, and then it is a very severe carcinogenic for forms of cancer like gallbladder cancer and others. So these are serious issues.
Wow.
But then when you really when people, I mean, one thing is about the accessibility of data. Where do you really go, where do you see, what are the hotspots? But the other whole thing is communication of this data. How do people really understand what this data means? If you get a water testing report, how do you really make sense of it? Where do you go to
Yeah.
find out what it really means? So that's that kind of an accessibility to interpreting this technical data is very poor, and also communicating it to different audiences is even more poor,
Hmm.
because of the I mean, it's not that, it's input output. You drink this water, you're going to fall flat now. No, it could affect you in some time. So the sense of, disbelief or belief within it is also a lot.
You know, I'm just reacting to what you're saying. In terms of arsenic and everything else. In our home, right? How do we make peace with water? Is we'll buy an RO unit, right? And then we'll say that, okay, I'm going to boil water. I'm going to get water from RO unit, and then I'm going to boil this water, and then I'm completely assured that me and my family are not exposed to any of these risks. Right? I have two questions. Is this a bit of a myth, right? I mean, are we fooling ourselves? And are there any known issues associated with things like RO?
Yes, Karthik, and good question, and we keep getting this question,
Hmm.
time and again. For most parts of a country, most places, RO is an overkill. For most places, there are places in our country where, so basically, RO is a good reverse osmosis. RO systems are a good desalination mechanism,
Hmm.
but also very highly energy intensive. But at the same time, it does remove salts. It does remove, basically it reduces the total dissolved solids. That's how you see the TDS meter, actually
Right.
showing a reduction, in the salts. Now, the I mean, there are many reasons why, why RO should not be a preferred technology, for a country like ours. One definitely being the energy costs, of using technologies such as, reverse osmosis.
Hmm.
But a big reason is that it is not very selective. It just reduces a lot of minerals within the water without being selective, to any
Hmm.
of them. And the way in which, different manufacturers have actually set up the RO machines is that it reduces the mineral content in water, or very simply put, reduces the TDS to such an extent that it gets very close to being also harmful to human beings.
Hmm.
Right? I
Well,
mean,
you
very low
mean
TDS
harmful
water
because
is
it's water sans any mineral? Is that how you
water
mean?
science. I mean, distilled water is, water without anything written, right? But
Hmm.
it doesn't get it close to distilled water. But even water with TDS like 30, 40 is not good for us. I mean, it's not
Hmm.
good for, human beings. I mean, 80 to 100 is a basic minimum, which is recommended for human consumption. Um, Now, the earliest instance of and the long term usage of RO water is with, some of the some countries had adopted, RO machines RO technologies as early as 70s or early 70s or mid 70s, and then there were studies to look at the long-term impact of RO systems for after a couple of decades of using RO water. What they realize is that till a certain extent of around a TDS of 100 or 120, the health impacts are not so severe. But then when you actually get down to very low TDS water, 30, 40 and below, then you also get into highly severely nutritional disorders, because it tends to kind of suck out the nutrients from our body, and in the long run it causes other issues within a system. So there is a health impact of using low TDS water. But apart from that, whether is the water quality such that you need RO everywhere? The simple answer is no. I mean,
Hmm.
most of the places where RO is really needed in our country, people are not able to afford or really not go for it. And
Right.
most of the places where you have RO machines are where it's really not needed. So that's a simple answer to it. Yeah.
What is the, if I may just go a little bit more in this road, what is then the answer to to places where we're doing an overkill with RO? Is
Yeah.
UV filters the right way to do it? What is the alternative to the consumer today?
Yeah. So when you look at, let us say, cities where water is being supplied, to a large segment of population, millions of people, it doesn't carry most of it. Doesn't carry these chemical contaminants that I spoke about. Most of it doesn't carry.
Because it is
There are
treated
instances.
centrally. Is that the reason?
It is treated centrally. It is not like you have 600,000 villages where there is water supply going on from thousands of schemes. These are centralized schemes. Even when it happens, it can get detected. So the critical problem is that of disinfection, that is bacterial or viral contamination. Now, uh, I mean, a simple answer: UV. I mean, that's actually a beautiful technology, which was picking up in India in early 90s.
Hmm.
But then this whole direction of um, quality being perceived as taste started happening from late 90s and early 2000s. Now,
Hmm.
what led to it? How did it happen? I mean, there are different people have different versions of it, but it did happen, right? This whole movement around mineral water or demineralized water, whatever we call it, right? Which started from a few companies, and then it got promoted. It picked up fast, and then the whole industry also picked up very fast, and then this whole direction went towards having water of a certain taste, right? That is tasteless water, which comes from RO.
Hmm.
So if you look at our simple household consumption, even chlorination, where it works, in the cities, so there's something called residual chlorine, which has to remain, within water. So residual chlorine means that when chlorination is done at a centralized level, and
Hmm.
then when water actually reaches our home, then it's supposed to be between zero point 0.2 and zero point 0.5 milligram per liter, but also till 1 milligram per liter is okay.
Hmm.
So that chlorine stays in that water and it is fine for consumption. And there are studies over last 100 200 years to show that chlorine at this level is not that harmful for us, because even chlorine can be harmful. Chlorine can
Hmm.
also be
Hmm.
harmful, such as other chemicals. But then if we don't trust that, and if we feel that there is contamination along the way because there is leakage of water and all that, then UV is a great technology to go with.
Right.
Unfortunately, the industry kind of got suppressed over the years, but yeah, there are still you still
Hmm.
get it in different places.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for irony, and I want to make sure I caught it right. What you said, which is what goes around as mineral water is actually demineralized water. Am I right
Yeah,
in
yeah,
saying that
yeah,
mostly?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
True, true.
You work with Sundar. You work with the Jal Jeevan Mission a lot, and it's an organization that aims to bring portable tap water connection to every home, right? And from a water quality perspective, there is a lot at play. But what are the challenges that you see in making that happen, in making portable water available to every home happen?
Yes, Kadesh. So I work with an organization called INREM Foundation, and Jal Jeevan Mission is this national program of Government of India, which is aiming to supply clean and safe water to every rural household by 2024. So that's the mission, stated mission of Jal Jeevan Mission. So we closely support Jal Jeevan Mission to try and ensure potable, safe water reaching people's homes, and that's how we are associated as an organization with the Jal Jeevan mission. You know, Jal Jeevan Mission is uh, a very ambitious program, because imagine, as I said, 600,000 villages and reaching water to every household. And when you look at our cities, so cities have more centralized schemes, and not all of our states and parts of states can have these centralized schemes for long distances to supply water to each and every household. So if you compare cities and villages, the houses are all spread across, settlements are still small. You have undulating terrain, and reaching water itself is a big nightmare, if you want to supply water through pipelines. Now, along with that, when you have these small schemes which are all separated out, and reaching safe water to each and every home is not an easy task. It's been for the last 30, 40 years, it's been a very difficult problem, to undertake, because already there is very less water to begin with, and then you have this additional thing of that water also being potable. And also, you have water from all across the country of all kinds, with all kinds of impurities from above the ground, below the ground. So then it becomes if you look at the scale of the country, it really becomes a challenging effort, to ensure that water is really, potable and it gets supplied. Having said that, there is a lot of experience in the country, for the last at least 10, 15 years on how this can be done. So one is that as local water as possible and as sustainable water supply sources as possible is definitely better. So that's the first option. That is to ensure how much local and more sustainable water supplies are present, which are replenished annually, which are supported by local water conservation programs as much as possible. And that is what is being attempted now. How can you localize it as much as? But there are many areas where it is not possible to assure that. So water comes from a very long distance, sometimes from 10 kilometers, even 100 kilometers or more. Water is
Yeah.
supplied from long distances. So it produces challenge of pumping all that water from far away, the electricity required, energy required, and water to come here. Above that, the cost of water treatment, that is with impurities, and to actually ensure that it reaches people. People also, getting people ready, getting rural communities ready to also understand that all this is needed. Water everybody needs, right? If you send a lot of water to my home, I'll always happy about it. But then if you look at the costs of all this water, it also requires people to participate and also pay for some of the expenses, even if sometimes it is something like 30 rupees per month. There are different charges across the country. So people to be really convinced to participate in the expenditure for operation maintenance of all these water programs, then this whole idea that this is being done for us, the safe water to be reaching my home, and this is the cost that it takes, and I also need to be participating in it, that is a big change shift from people, a mind shift change, to actually feel that the safety of water is important, purity of water is important. And that is the whole idea that I mentioned to you about people themselves participating in testing of water, surveillance of water using FTKs or field testing kits. That is also happening. That is just beginning, in the country. But I think we are very far from, really saying that, yeah, like people are conscious enough, the programs are sustainable enough to really bring a big change for the long term. Jal Jeevan Mission is a great beginning, but then we are going to have a lot of effort, over the coming years to really try and make it more sustainable. So that's the next big challenge that we are going to have.
Hmm. And in doing something of this context, right, or rather of this extent, the ambition of doing this by 2024 to every home in India, it's a huge ambition, isn't it? And you would most definitely need the civil society at play for this as well, isn't it? You know, talk to us a little bit about how that engagement of with the civil society is going. For something like this, I'm assuming a lot of the people from the civil society will have to be trained to build capacities in the system. How is that collaboration going?
Um, so the way this program was envisaged, if you look at each of the government, large scale programs, they also have guidelines, associated with it. So right at the beginning, the program kind of went out and took a lot of recommendations, from practitioners who have been working on the field for many years, and they realized that unless there is a lot of participation from citizens in terms of informal groups, community-based groups, formal NGOs, organizations, and other bodies, across the country, the program is not going to be a success. Right? It is not going to be something which engineers which just come in and construct pipelines and get away with. It really requires the close participation of people in different forms, formal organizations, informal organizations, citizen groups, to be a part of it. So there have been a lot of efforts going towards that. One of these is to see how community-based NGOs are absorbed, as a part of this, wider mission. So one such effort is called the Rural Wash Partner Forum. The Rural Wash Partner Forum was created last year by the Jal Jeevan Mission, where organizations like ours, are members within it, and there are many organizations, who are part of it across the country, and there are different thematics, that we all work on. For example, our organization works specifically on the thematic of ensuring quality water, to every household. There are other organizations which are working around community-based institutions. For example, at the root, in the village, there is something called the Village Water Sanitation Committee, VWSC. Unless the village council or the village committee really is energized, it is mobilized, people are working around it, there is very less chance that a program like this, a message of that reaches the community. There is very less chance that people get to know about it. So there are different organizations working on different thematics. There are different organizations working in different states, and this all is being brought together by the Rural Wash Partner Forum, which is around 200 or 300 organizations as part of it. That is one part of it, which are formal NGOs that are along with Jal Jeevan Mission. Apart from that, the Jal Jeevan Mission puts a lot of effort on ensuring that women participation is maximized for this program. So if you take drinking water or water in homes, it is unless women are really part of the planning process, unless women are really part of the process of surveillance, and thinking about the program in the long term sustainability of the program, the chances of such an effort sustaining is very less. Right?
Absolutely.
So one of the initiatives of this mission is to have 5 women in each village testing water. So 5 women in each village are identified to test water using field testing kits, participate in community-based surveillance of these schemes, and report back to the Jal Jeevan Mission. So these are all part of the program design. But now when actually all these programs, now 2 years of the program, the first 2 years, were during the COVID lockdown, and then the Jal Jeevan program started basically sometime last year. The real challenges in actually engaging people at the scale, while at the pace of implementing all these energy and infrastructure heavy efforts, that is something which is of concern. Is it really happening? Are really people involved? Are village communities really involved? What we see is that yes, in pockets, but not entirely. There are pockets where we really see a lot of energy, where the state is really participating, but not really at the large scale.
Wonderful. Lots to talk about in this, but in the interest of time, I want to turn the discussion towards two things that you're working on that I picked up, when I was researching, for the episode. One, of course, is something called as the Water Quality Network, and the other, of course, I'm very excited about the sound of it, which is waterhealth.ai. Right? Can you talk to us a little bit about what both of these are and what is the vision behind these initiatives?
Sure, Karthik. So these two, in fact, you picked up these initiatives are as things which are very close to our heart, and we invest on it a lot for the long run. So one is that we realize that individuals like me, or people like us, are very few who are working on these issues which are very critical to the nation and for the future of the future generation. Because what really affects is our children who get affected by these issues, by these contamination problems in the long run. I mean, the first 2 years of life, the kind of water or the kind of environment you're exposed to, it really influences first 2-3 years. It really influences our health for the long term. So we are really investing, these on this, for the next whole generation, and that's where a lot of people need to get involved, into an issue like this, for a lot of
Hmm.
people to be knowing about something like this. And that's the idea behind the water quality, network. That is, how do you get uh, more and more people talking about it, more and more people knowledgeable about quality of water, to have
Hmm.
clean water, natural water in all forms and in all places. And what we really promote within it is what we call communities of practitioners, in the sense that we feel knowledge is all there, there are research papers, there are articles and all that, but unless you really practice, unless you really, let us say, practicing could be just talking about it, could be testing water, could be talking with people, could be actually conserving a small lake, it could be so many things to do. And that's where we come in, where we help these small communities of practitioners to get started. We connect them with experts, with resources. We try our best to see, how initiatives like this don't die off, that they get connected to not just, money or funding resources, but also sometimes it's about more encouragement, for the long term, and build these communities at different scales. So there are different communities of practice that we, seed as part of the water quality network, so that the idea stays on. And
Hmm.
these are students in Assam, these are health workers in Telangana, these are nutrition workers in Rajasthan, and so on. I mean, everywhere, it's a different community, that we support. Now, while we actually do it at a large scale, we see that, as you rightly pointed out, information and data to be accessible, and these
Hmm.
hotspots to be identified is a big challenge. And data is always an issue. How much of a data you need, you get, it's always a scarce issue. And that's where the idea of water health AI came in, where we realized that um, all this is being spoken about because it is critical for health, right? And more and more, if you take people like me, or who are working on these issues for a long time, a few of us are, even able to visually identify some of these problems by just looking at it. For example, if you take one issue such as, arsenic or other like fluoride, we can just look at the teeth of children and say whether fluoride here is high or low. So that's the kind of expertise that some people, come in, but that's expertise is not available at scale, to people, right? So how can you really use this expertise, train digital information to actually capture? Is it really possible to use AI or whatever other form of learning, automated learning, to get more and more people to predict how health can be affected, by water? That's the idea behind in water health AI, and it's a initiative in its early stages.
Wonderful. Right. Fascinating body of work, Sundar. Thank you so much for sharing this. This is eye-opening at multiple different levels, both as a consumer, as a citizen, and also as someone uh, who's in this mission for water. Thank you so much. Good luck with all the initiatives you're pursuing, and thanks for spending time with us.
Thank you so much, Karthik, and for taking this time for this interaction. And would like to know more about your work and what you do, maybe some other time.
Absolutely. There's
Okay.
another podcast where we can discuss that.
Sure, sure.
uh, Thank you, Sundar. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay.